Hi, do you work here?
Yep.
Yeah, I got a question about these bullets. When I go to seat these in the case, how deep should I seat them?
Doesn't really matter. You can set them any depth you want.
What the f? Old Man Taylor, coming to you from the reloading bench. Today's episode, gonna be some controversy. All right, in one camp, we've got a lab with some engineers and some test equipment. They've put out some information that seems to be contradictory to pretty much everybody else. What we're going to do today is test those ideas, take a look at a couple of them, and find out for ourselves which of those two ideas are correct. Or is there something else going on? What I'm talking about Hornady's podcast 50 and 52. If you haven't seen those podcasts, they've been quoted quite a bit. Take a look in the description. I'm going to have a link to both of those podcasts. There's a lot of really good information in there. I do recommend that you watch those two if you haven't already. All right. What they're telling us in those podcasts basically is seating depth may not be as important as we once thought. I've reached out to Hornady to see if they would work with me a little bit on what this test looks like and maybe review my results before I posted them. Apparently, Old Man Taylor is not big enough to cause Hornady to take any action. They didn't return my call. All right, no big deal. If you'd like to change that, by the way, now would be a really good time to hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. All right, I had to throw that in there. Meanwhile, I did reach out to a pretty well-known figure in the shooting world, Erik Cortina, and Erik did respond quite quickly with his permission to use his video, and I'll put up just a clip of that, and his method to find seating depth. And the reason I want to use his method to find seating depth just happens to be pretty dang close to my method of using seating depth. Finding seating depth. So when we're talking about finding seating depth, in this case, we're going to be using a bolt action rifle, and we'll account for magazine. So sometimes with precision, our bullets tend to be longer than a magazine. We're going to make them fit in the mag. All right. So that means it would also apply to semi-automatic. All right. So let's take a look at that clip and see what's going on there.
What do you guys do for load development now? You don't have to tell us how you used to do it, but what do you do right now?
I seat the bullets 25 to 35 thousandths off the lands and forget my seating die is adjustable.
You guys tested jump depths and how far that bullet jumps to the rifling and then its effect on dispersion, and you tested that in pretty small increments in large sample size. Miles, do you have any, again, I'm not trying to preach this to our listeners as gospel, but from the data you collected, what can you tell us about it?
In the cartridges that I used, so 6-ARC and 6.5 Creedmoor, it made a difference. It was small enough that that's my attitude, what I talked about earlier, where I basically jump them 25, 30 thou and forget that the seating die is adjustable.
I think there's not as much validity to that as we have thought over time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be an accurate statement.
Yeah. And then, like I said, there may be situations where seating depth is something to play around with. I know a lot of people beat me up on that, saying, oh, seating depth doesn't matter. It's like, in the testing that I have done in that bubble, no, not so much. I mean, little baby trends that could be eaten up by even sample size noise of 20 or 30 shot groups. So could you see it in your rifle with your bullet, with your load? Potentially. I mean, is it worth exploring? Sure.
So there's episode 50, a couple things that they said there. Just want to talk about for a second. One, they were talking, the whole podcast is about group size. Well, when we do our seating test, we tend to use 3-shot groups. That is contradictory to the whole episode and the follow-up episode, saying that 3-shot groups don't tell us anything, right? Then the second point these guys are trying to make is, in their lab testing of 2 calibers that they picked specifically to not be impacted by jump very much, jump being the distance from that seating depth causes, right, making it longer or shorter by making the bullet longer or shorter. They chose two calibers that are modern designs. They chose two bullets. They're also modern designs, both of which are designed specifically to make that jump less critical, all right? Their results then, not surprisingly, showed jump really didn't have a big impact on anything, okay? Meanwhile, we've got Erik's method, and I'll go ahead and run that clip.
If you see what's going on here, I am moving the bullet away from jam 3,000ths at a time in 3,000ths increments. I know a lot of people suggest going 10, 20, whatever. You will find out that your seating depth nodes are only about 6,000ths wide, and it depends on the bullet you're shooting. Some of them are even smaller than that. So they're only 6,000ths wide. So if you go 10, you're gonna be skipping a lot of nodes, all right? And that's why a lot of people have a hard time finding a seating depth node, okay? So you're gonna go 3,000ths at a time. But anyway, back to this testing. So you're gonna be just moving 3,000ths away from the lens. Let's just say you get to 29,000ths away from the lens. All right, let's just say your groups look like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, okay? You wanna find at least two groups consecutive that shoot really well. Do not, I repeat, do not fall for this tiny group. You have a big group here, tiny group, big group here. Do not fall for that, okay? You wanna select a node that has at least two consecutive small groups, okay? That gives you 6,000ths, okay? And then you're gonna seat to the longest one minus 1,000th, okay?
All right, so Erik is using 3-shot groups. Erik is looking for a node where seating depth is giving him precision, better precision, right? That's pretty much what he's doing there. So that seems to be pretty contradictory to what Hornady's doing. But Hornady also said that some other chambers, it may matter, right? And people that watch this video tend to forget this part. It's pretty important. Let's take a listen.
Should be to get a barrel pick a cartridge that doesn't have such a optimal, I'm going to call it, chamber dimension. Pick something like a .308 Winchester, for example, just a standard Sammy Reamer .308 Winchester, and do the same test with a different manufacturer's bullet that has a much more aggressive ogive profile that should theoretically be way more jump sensitive. I'd like to see that test.
So they came out and said, maybe we should test 308 in a different bullet that this might be a little bit more important to. All right, that was a couple years ago. They still haven't done that. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to test 308. We're going to test a Sierra Match King that may be a little bit more sensitive to jump. I don't know. But we're going to put that through the test, and we're going to do it using Erik's 3-shot groups. We're going to do it using 3,000ths steps, and we're going to see if we get a node. So let's see if we get this sine wave. The Hornady is saying if we shoot enough bullets, kind of goes away. It doesn't matter, right? We're going to do that with a large group at the end, which everybody sort of does, right? But here's the twist. We're going to also load the worst in our sine wave, a large group, and we're going to shoot our best and our worst and see, are those groups the same as the 3-shot idea with your groups not big enough would imply, right? So if those groups come out to be pretty dang similar, maybe Hornady's onto something even for a 308, right? Or we may see a significant difference that will tell us that we need to keep doing this and that 3-shot groups were successful in finding that node for us, right? I'm shooting this video before I have shot the bullets. I haven't made the bullets yet. So this is going to be a surprise for me too. I can tell you I've been reloading for 35 plus years, and I have used something similar looking for a quote node, looking for a spot where my groups tighten up and then get wide again. If Hornaday's right, I can skip that step, right? I can choose the length that I want, save me all of that shooting, prep time, record keeping, all the things that can go wrong there, and just go right to, after my powder, go ahead and just make my bullets, right? And I'm done, and I can shoot. Or that's a pretty danged important step. And if you've been on the internet, if you've been on the forums, what we typically see, we see a new guy, hi, I'm new to reloading, how deep should I seat these bullets? Well, all of those responses tend to come back into one of two categories. Everyone giving their method of finding that seating depth, or everyone telling us that's FUD lore, it's been disproved. And they quote these podcasts, right, when they do that. So let's put a rest to that one way or the other and have a second piece of information that either confirms Hornady or a piece of information that we can point to and go, check it out. Sometimes that is correct, sometimes it's not. All right, let's get to making some bullets. We will be starting with the universal decap die. Okay, we're going to use a little of the lanolin alcohol homebrew for lubrication. Just a couple squirts. That's good enough. I'll set up the press for full size resize next. Our next step will be opening our mouths of the cases up using a mandrel. So I'm going to use a little bit of dry lube to protect the mandrel, and I'll leave that on the inside of the neck, and that'll give me a little bit of lube for seating the bullet. Helps just a tiny bit with accuracy. If you don't have this set up and you're trying to shoot sub MOA, you can. This is not required. Just a little bit extra. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. All right, let's talk about how we're going to actually do this with the seating depths. So what I've done is I've created 16 loads, 16 different depths, based on my jam, coming down 3/1000ths of an inch for each one. I've got my magazine height pretty quick, so we'll go ahead and shoot a few that'll be a little bit too long. But we expect to find that sweet spot a little bit closer to magazine length. I'm going to load 3 cartridges to each one of these, and I'm going to set up a string of 16 3-shot groups. That's going to be the plan. So the way I achieve that, I've went ahead and set my seating die up. I've got it set for the first one. Made one round already. But basically, all we're going to do is load 3 bullets. Check those. 0 our calipers closed. Check each one. Now, we wouldn't normally have to check each one, but this is all about seating depth. So I want to be 100% sure every one of them is exactly, not within 0.5 but exactly what we're asking for. If I go a little too far, if I pull one and it's just a little too deep, or I'm setting this up for the first batch and it's just a little too long, I'm going to use a kinetic bullet puller and slightly pull that bullet out. Just give it a light tap and let it come out. Now, because I'm running 16 3-shot groups, that's 48 shots. That gives me 2 extras, so to speak. I want to keep, I've got 50 pieces of brass. I want to keep my brass all once, the same number of firings. So I'm going to shoot 50. That gives me 2 to clear my barrel, get warmed up, whatever I want to do. If I find that I've got to pull one a lot, something happened and I really set it too deep, that may disturb the neck tension a little bit. I'll just mark that with a Sharpie, and I'll set that as one of my fouling shots instead of loading it and using it in my test group. All right, there we go. So I've got my first 3. Now I want to come back 0.003. In this case, what I'm actually using is a micrometer adjustment on my seating die. Don't have to have that, but for this type of thing, makes it really easy. You just dial in 3 on it. This particular one is RCBS's Matchmaster. I just really like these dies. There are several other brands that will do the same thing. This is just the one that I've got. So, and I have found that it's pretty close. 1, 2, 3. I would not be surprised if that is exact. Their micrometer is very, very close to the 1,000th. All right, so this one's 2.683 is what we're looking for. And we have 2.683, right on the money. So I'm just going to keep doing that, and since I have that feature, it's just going to be 3 notches, and then I'm on to the next. If you don't have that, this can take a bit longer because I want to come down 2.5, and then just add a little bit rather than have to pull, right? So I'd rather them be just a touch long so I can make another adjustment and then get them the rest of the way, rather than going a little too far and then having to use the puller and potentially disturbing that neck tension. So if you don't have this, try that idea. Give it a quick turn, measure it, give it another little turn, seat it just a little farther until you get right on it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that times 16, and then I'm going to put them in the boxes, and I'll tape the 3 strings so that they're separate, and I'll peel off one roll of tape and shoot all 3 and then pull off the next, so I can't accidentally cross that up when we get to the range. So we've got all of our rounds loaded and ready. We've got them in our boxes, taped up and ready to go. That means our next stop is the range. See you there. String 3. String 4. String 5.
But I wasn't in. You know, I'm glad I did it, but I'm glad.
String number 6. String 7. String number 8. String number 9. String 10. String 11. Group 12. Group 14. Group 15. All right, group 16. That'll be a wrap. Back from the range. Was a little bit delayed, so I apologize. This video is coming out a little later than I advertised in my last video. I apologize, but I did get all 48 shots, nice clean strings on paper, 3-shot groups, 16 of them. I'll start putting those up now. I went ahead and used the app, figured out the inches, how many inches for each group. I figured out the mean radius for folks that are interested in that. That's also on the sheet, as well as a deviation from my point of aim. That's interesting to anyone, there'll be 16 of them scrolling by here. Now, what did I do with that data? Well, I put that in a spreadsheet, and you don't have to do it this way, but this gives us a nice visual. So I put them in order from the longest to the shortest as far as seating depth goes, and then put their group size next to that. Then I created a graph, all right? What we wanted to see here was a bit of a sine wave type action. We want to see the groups get small at the bottom and then see that kind of open up and then see where they get small again. And as a reminder, what Erik was talking about in his video is the same idea I've always used, and that is I'm looking for more than one small group. If I have one small group with just 3 shots, it's possible it's just luck of the draw on a larger group. But if I can get that kind of a pattern going with the groups before it and after it also tightening up, that kind of confirms that that area, and that's the node we call it, is a tighter group than the average, right? That's the concept. So I've got a graph here, and I will put that up here as well. But you know, it's not a perfect sine wave. It's kind of jagged actually. But we can see there's multiple shots that are giving us a trend down. Then there's multiple shots that are giving us a trend up. And then we can see multiple shots reverse that again. And that kind of plays out. We can also see that it's kind of got an upward drift, if it were. And this is shortest on this side to the longest. So just looking at that, we've got a couple sweet spots. Looking for the 2 smallest groups, that 6,000th of an inch, right? 2 small groups that are our tightest groups that we have. We can see that. That's at 0.265. I've highlighted that green on the graph here. That's confirming the one right before it was 2.647, right? That's 0.45 inches, 0.36 inches, and then we start going back up. So I've my 2 smallest groups actually touch. That's the node we're looking for. All right, and I've also highlighted one red. This isn't something Erik talked about. This is something I've added for this video, and that is the same thing happening on the wide side. All right, so if we take a look at this, we can see my first group, that largest, is over an inch, and then it shrinks down a little bit, 0.69, and then my second highest of the day, 0.79, right next to it. So really those 3 shots, kind of that 3 group, kind of my biggest spread that I had. Now, one thing to note, there's less than a half inch between my very best and my very worst. So it is worth pointing out that if your system, you, the shooter, are not capable of shooting smaller than half-inch groups, so to speak, your rifle's not capable of that, then this may all be noise, right? You may not see that significant node because you're just not capable of shooting better than the system, right? So just keep that in mind. You may be doing this exact same thing, but yours is 1.5 inches, because that's what your rifle produces. So don't get hung up on the size itself. That really doesn't have a lot to do with it. This is me shooting, a factory Tikka rifle, nothing exotic. If I was to give these numbers to Erik, the guy in this video, he'd probably tell me I need a new barrel, new action, and a lot of training, because this is all way too big, right? So I'm just pointing that out. Don't get fixated on an actual number. We're just looking for the pattern that system can create. So one other thing, one more point to make here is a lot of folks are starting to go to that MR, that mean radius. So I went ahead and did this same graph in mean radius. I'll put that up right next to it. Now, if we look at that, there were a few mean radiuses that weren't the smallest or the largest that lined up with the inches exactly all the way through. But the graph is very similar, and it did identify the smallest node that we've identified we want to use and the largest node. So it did a good job of picking it the same as this, all right? Now here's a bit of a surprise. All right, these are my targets that I shot today. Now there's 4 of them. Well, guess what? This is not the first time I've done this. With these bullets, this gunpowder, and this brass, all right? I've already done a seating depth check on this whole thing using my system a while back. And I went ahead and did the round count, looked in my book, and that was 780 bullets ago that I did this the first time, okay? Now, so why am I doing this again, right? Did I just waste everybody's time? Hold on, all right? So one of the points that, that Miles made in that episode 50, your groups are too small, is a really valid point. And that is, once we do this, we shoot 3 shots, we pick the best one, and we just load to that forever. We never go back and see, is that reproducible? We never go back and shoot another group, the larger one, right? That's why I'm doing this. But that point is, we never go back and confirm that sine wave was real, right? We may get a sine wave that's completely contradictory. That's possible. So what I wanted to do was do this the very best that I possibly could, again, and then take the data from my earlier group and see, are the sine waves the same, or are they completely different, right? Well, that's this graph. So I've got the readings on this side for group 1 and 2. Ours today is the orange one. The blue one is the older one. Of course, I'm going to put that right here so you can see that a lot better. What do we see? We see the sine waves are not the same. But if we look at that carefully, we'll notice that the node we have identified as our best node off of today's shooting is the same node that this earlier group identified. Now, when we look at the worst, it's a little bit different. The worst shows my second group and my third group are my 2 worst groups. That's what today's also showed me. The difference is this shows the second group was my very worst and my third was my second worst. And today that was reversed. It also identified the worst node, interestingly enough. So the graphs are not completely identical. There is more spread in the first one. That barrel was fairly new. I had fired 50 shots through it, maybe 60, I think it was, before I shot the seating depth. It was on the new barrel, the new rifle. So over time, has that flattened out a little bit? Yeah, I think it probably has. I'm the same shooter I was. I'm using the same components, same rifle, 700 to 800 rounds later. It's kind of a little bit tighter, but it's still a node. All right. So what we're going to do next, as promised, I'm going to load 25 of my best node, 25 of my worst node, and we're going to take a look at those 25 shot groups and see, is one significantly smaller than the other? Back to the range. We're back at the range for round 2. What I've done is I've loaded 25 of my smallest group, 25 of my largest group, subtracting 1,000 from that node, as Eric talked about. And I've loaded them up exactly the same way that we did the test rounds, the ladder rounds. And what we're going to do today, I said I was going to shoot a 25 shot group of each, but I want to get the mean radius of those shots as well as just group size. So how I'm going to accomplish that is I'm going to shoot 5 identical targets with 5 shots. I've got a program that will overlay those 5 shot groups and create a virtual 25 shot group. So we can see what it would look like if I would have fired all 25 at the same target, but I'll be able to place each bullet in order to get the mean radius. The challenge with shooting all 25 at one piece of paper is I won't be able to find all the ones that went through the hole of another shot afterwards, right? So this way I'll be able to get better data. I'll end up with the same result, but we'll be able to see inches, mils, MOA, mean radius, however we want to slice this up, and be able to see the difference. In order to make sure that I'm consistent with this, I have 2 different pages, each with 5 targets. I'm going to put small on one, large on the other, and I'm going to stack those targets, and I'm going to shoot those 5-shot groups round robin. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, I'm going to shoot the small group 1, and then I'm going to shoot the large group 1, and then the small group 2, and then the large group 2. Why am I doing it that way? Well, I do have some weather coming through today. It's going to rain while I'm shooting. I'm sure of that. May get a little bit of wind here and there. And I don't want the change in my environment to impact one of those 2 groups and not both of them exactly the same. So once again, that may open my groups up a little bit. They might be a little larger than if I would just had perfect weather. But once again, we're not really comparing the size of the group. We're comparing them relative to each other. Is there a difference? That's what we're trying to see here, and this should be able to give us that result. So let's hope the weather holds for us. I don't think it will. I have printed these targets out. They will probably run. The bullet holes won't move. The computer will be able to find the exact centers based on the red lines on here. That's why I'm using these particular targets. They are from this software program to be sure I can overlay that. If the centers really start to run and I don't have a really good aim point, I'll take a Sharpie and add the exact center so I can find that with my reticle and stay consistent. All right, so don't be worried if we see some colors running on the paper as it's raining. I expect we probably will. All right, once we have that data and I'm completed here, we'll pull those targets, I'll stick them in the computer, and I will see you back at the reloading bench to talk about what we found. Uh-oh. Looks like I started that recording. I am back from the range. I've got targets. I've loaded these into the computer. I've got some data to share with you. Before I do that, I do want to say, please take a minute and leave a comment about what you liked, what you didn't like, things I can do to improve this channel, things you'd like to see done a little differently. I would thoroughly appreciate that, and that will help drive the channel as well. So please take a minute to do that. All right, so when I'm looking at these targets, you can see they're wet, right? You know, we definitely had some rain. Let's talk about that weather for just a minute. I had a low pressure coming through. There was a high pressure that came in behind it. No big deal. The wind didn't pick up. That, you know, I think that's probably the most important thing. I had some gusts up to maybe 5 miles an hour, but very few. And I was careful to shoot when I didn't feel anything. I did have a flag down range, and it was pretty much laying or near laying through the whole process. So that's really good. We've got 50 clean shots. I didn't call any that weren't perfect as far as looking through the scope when the trigger broke. The rifle fired. My dot was exactly in the center for all 50. No flyers involved in any of this. Everything went very well. So those are the targets. You know what I did with them. Took a picture of them. I did use my calipers to give it a 1-inch reference. These squares are not 1 inch. They're 0.686 if anybody really cares. I had to shrink them down, obviously, to fit on my printer paper. So my pictures are going to show that 1 inch to give you an idea of what these group sizes look like. My computer obviously uses that as a reference when it's calculating all this data. So I loaded that into the computer, put my program to work, and stacked all 5 for the smalls. Let's talk about it first. So on the small side, this was the end of our graph over here that was the shorter bullets. Those came out at 0.86 inches is what that 25 shot group looks like. The mean radius, and I'll put this up here. You know, I probably don't need to read all this data. I'll just put it up here. You can pause the screen if you want and take a look at all that. When we look at the large side, and this was our worst node that we loaded to, it's a little bigger. 1.125 inches is what we got out of that. What's the difference between them? 0.27 inches. So about a 1/4 inch, just a little more than a 1/4 inch. That's the difference in large groups between the two. Is that significant? Yeah, it is. Is that worth doing? That's another question. So it depends on you. It depends on what you're doing. It depends on what your group sizes look like. Maybe not. You know, if the difference between shooting 0.86 versus 0.12 doesn't really matter to you, then maybe it doesn't matter that you go through all this trouble, right? Most of us, though, are spending a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort trying to drive our groups down as small as we possibly can. A little bit more than a 1/4 inch on a 1 inch group. Yeah, most of us would find that's worth doing. Once again, your situation will determine whether that's true for you or not. But I've got some more data just to support this and to talk about a couple more pieces before we get too far here. So the next thing I want to talk about is where these bullets are as far as off the lands. Why does that matter? Well, when I grew up in this hobby, one of the first things I was told is, you know, find jam, come off the jam 20,000s. Well, that is still a prevalent thing that I hear and people say quite a bit. It's definitely old school. Well, we've been doing it that way for a long time. For this particular rifle, this particular bullet combination, what we found was 20,000s off our land was our longest group, right? That was right there in that 3 group cluster. That was our worst node. That's worth noting also. So if we just go off that old school and we don't actually shoot this ladder, we may or may not be picking the best load. In this instance, it was actually the worst load, all right? So when we're talking about that, if we remember when we looked at our graph, we saw both of our graphs, the old one and the new one, had a trend. As we went longer, the groups were getting larger. So because I've got this computer program, I went ahead and got some more data. What did I do? I took the 48 shot ladder and plugged that in to get composite targets. I made 2 composite targets from those 48 shots, 24 and 24. It's pretty close to this 25 and 25, right? If that node was real, if that was a thing and that trend was accurate, what we would expect to see is the shorter bullets on that far side where our groups were generally smaller. We would expect that 25, 24 shot composite group to be smaller than the other end, which we would expect to be larger. Well, was it? If we take a look at our composite small, all right, we can see that composite small, and I'll put that up here too, came out just over an inch, 1.029 inches. So that half, just all mixed together, was actually smaller than our worst node. All right, we would expect that, and that's what the data says. How about the large node? Go ahead and put that up too. 1.47, right? So it was even worse than our large node by itself. What does that tell us? It tells us 2 things. One, even if we didn't identify the perfect best seating depth, just knowing that we were on the right half of the entire test gave us a better group. Okay, that's point 1. The second thing that this is telling us is that our seating depth variance, you know, when I actually seat my bullet and I compare one bullet to the next, to the next, to the next, isn't as critical as we may have thought. And that difference is going to be a little more than 1/10 of an inch. All right, that's what we're looking at here, 0.14, right? Once again, whether that's worth chasing for you or not depends on what you're trying to do and what your particular circumstance is, right? So that's the data that we collected on the big groups by using that program and making a composite. But I want to talk about one more piece. And I started this whole thing by showing you Hornady's episode 50. Your groups are too small, right? Well, the whole point to their video wasn't about seating depth. That was in there, and that's why I picked it. But the actual video was about you can't tell much from 3 and 5 shot groups. Well, when we shot our 3 shot ladders, 2 of them, they both identified the correct node, and they both identified the worst node. So 3 shot groups actually can be useful as long as we use them the correct way. What do I mean by that? Well, by themselves they're kind of useless. But if you remember our node we were looking for a pattern of groups. They got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then larger and then larger and then larger. And that pointed to our best group down at the bottom of that node, or our best 2, as it were. So the 3 shot groups, even if the variance, I just got lucky and got 3 of the best of a group. Well, the one before it and the one after it, they're going to use that same random distribution of all the shots that are going to be in that group, and they'll either point to it or they won't. So using it that way to establish a pattern, it actually did work not once, but twice, okay? Where is it not useful? Well, here's something else all of our data can show us. On that 48 shot ladder I shot, when I put that in the computer, and sure, I'll put that up on the screen too, right? What I can see is over half of those groups, those 3 shot groups, started with a 0.5 or smaller, okay? So if I'm using that to evaluate my rifle system And me as the shooter and my bullets, and I'm looking at that and I'm just shooting, over half of them are in that .5 range. I'm thinking I'm a half MOA shooter with my rifle and this bullet combination. I'm good to half inch or close to it. When in reality, when we look at our 25 shot group, oops, nope, the best that I'm going to be is .86. If I double that to a 50 shot group, yeah, .9 starts getting realistic. So if we use a 3 or a 5 shot group to try to evaluate how good we are and how good our system is, that's where the 5 shot groups and the 3 shot groups come up short. That's where we need a larger group, right? That's when our groups are, in fact, too small. Okay. So what do we do today? Well, today, what do we do throughout this video? We confirmed that with 308 and SMK bullets, there is such a thing as a seating node. We confirmed that 3 shot groups can find it, and we confirmed that if we shoot large enough groups, it doesn't wash away the difference between the two. It is significant. Before I let you go, one last thing. I appreciate you staying to this point in the video. I appreciate your time. This video cost me a couple months worth of editing, shooting, about 100 bullets. It's free to you. If you would, what I would appreciate very much, if you're interested in this content and you want to see more of it, hit that subscribe button. If you don't and you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, if you will, at your very least. If you would like to see videos like this coming more often, you can help the budget out a little bit. I have turned on super likes, which I didn't even know existed until recently. So if you want to shoot me a little bit of money towards my bullet fund, all you got to do is hit the super like button. This is Old Man Taylor. Thank you.